Do you recognize this man? Well, of course you do. It's George Washington, our first president. In today's show, I thought we'd step back in time to Colonial Williamsburg and see how George and other citizens in the 18th century would have lived and eaten.
Material itself rather than the labor, it's much more cost effective to have something.
For a care of lesser value, you use more of a common everyday one.
Welcome to the Benjamin Powell House here in Williamsburg. Now, this house represents the home of a prosperous tradesman. You see, Mr. Powell was an undertaker, and not what you think. Undertakers in the 18th century were contractors. They built things, they undertook projects, hence the name undertaker. Now we're here in the dining room, which is very important. If you're like me, you love food, and I know you do. You see, the dining room was a hub of activity, but eating practices, dining practices were very different in the 18th century than they are today. I mean, we talk about 3 square meals, but in the 18th century, when you ate and how you ate and what you ate was really dependent on your class where you fit in the social structure. For instance, very poor people got up very early and ate an early breakfast. Wealthier people, well, they would eat later in the day. That really hasn't changed, has it? You see, in the 18th century, the major meal of the day was in the middle of the day or sort of late afternoon. It was called dinner. And then in the evening, they would have lighter fare and sup at night, therefore supper. And those meals would have been had in a room like this. However, today, when you think about it, dining rooms are hardly even used anymore in modern America. The hub of the house is the kitchen. Most people eat in the kitchen. They congregate in the kitchen. But in this house, you won't find a kitchen in the house. In fact, it's out this way. So why don't you follow me and I'll show you. That's smelling really good, Melissa.
Oh, well, thank you.
You know, cooking in the 18th century was a big chore, wasn't it?
Oh, it definitely was. It starts from good daylight in the morning with getting all of the things that you need ready for the day.
Very early.
Very early, break of day is
Yeah.
when you're going to start.
Right.
And that can be simply getting your fire started.
And you would do that by igniting coals that would have been left over from the day before. Is it true that if you didn't have hot coals in your house, you literally had to go to the neighbor to get a hot coal to start a fire?
That's going to be the next easiest way to do it, is to go to the neighbor, but you probably somewhere in the kitchen have flint, steel,
I see.
And would be able to start it that way as well.
Okay, but you know, there was a lot of physical labor involved here,
Yes.
wasn't there? I mean, the schlepping of water and these big wooden buckets.
Big wooden buckets, they're going to be at least 25 pounds of water, and to fill a pot this size is not too bad. It might be 1 bucket full. But throughout the day, as you're cooking a stew, that water is going to be boiling off. So you're going to have to keep going back and forth.
You know, it's so interesting. What's old is new again,
Yes.
because we're so into locally grown food, so farm to table, garden to table movement, and eating in season. Of course, in the 18th century, that's the way everyone ate.
That's correct. You had to rely on what's going to be in your garden. If it's not in the garden, then you have to plan for the year ahead.
Yeah.
So we don't have yet canning, which you see in the 19th century. So if we're going to preserve items, we can dry them, we can pickle them, or we have to wait till they come into season.
Now, standard fare, I would think, for most people would have been something like you're cooking today, a soup or a stew.
Yeah, that's going to be the easiest thing for you to prepare if you are working class. So if you are not gentry, you have to be working in the morning, working in the afternoon. Well, I can put that cut of meat into my stew pot first thing this morning, add the vegetables that are in season, and then be able to leave it and come back by the middle of the day and eat off of that.
Sounds like the revival of the slow cooking movement, where people are using these slow cookers.
The original crock pot.
Right. You put it in there in the morning before you go off to work, you come home and there it is.
Yes, exactly.
Very good. Of course, just looking down here, Melissa, I see some utensils and containers and so forth that look familiar to me. Is that a 18th century Dutch oven there?
That is. What we see here is it is above the ground. It gives you the legs so that you can put the coals underneath it, but it also has a nice flat lid so you can put the coals on top of it.
Right.
So you can do baking in there. You could make stews. Really, the Dutch oven is however you want to use it, and oftentimes that's going to be the first tool that you buy in your household.
Thank you very much, Melissa. I'll let you get back to your work.
Oh, well, thank you. It's my pleasure.
Very good. All right. So, growing your own vegetables today is very trendy, but back in the 18th century, well, it was a necessity.
Citizens, my name is Thomas Jefferson, and I have a trivia question for you. Which of the three was my favorite pet? Was it A, a dog, B, a mockingbird, or C, a monkey? Yes, quite correct. Thank you. What a delight to know the citizens are so well versed in my personal trivia. It is a mockingbird. In fact, I have called him Richard or Dick. He likes to perch himself right here on my shoulder. In fact, I have been known to bring him to many a cabinet meeting as President of the United States, and oh, the Federalists, they want to chastise me for it in the newspapers. They say President Jefferson brings a mockingbird to his cabinet meetings, for which I answer them, you are correct, which is unusual for the Federalists in their press. Yes, I do bring Richard to cabinet meetings, and I've known him to speak more good common sense than many of my ministers.
Now, just outside of the kitchen here at the Benjamin Powell house, what you see is the kitchen garden. In this particular town garden, you have 4 raised beds that are square, and then there are 4 others that are rectilinear. You could produce a lot of food in these beds. And well, the plants grew because of, well, they were well fertilized. It was all organically grown. They used the manure of cows, horses, and of course, chickens. If you move toward larger estates in Virginia, like George Washington's Mount Vernon, you saw a very different layout, something more ornamental. The raised beds were laid out in parterres or sections of various designs and shapes. You see, Martha Washington had the reputation of being a marvelous hostess and an exquisite cook. And so she had a wide range of vegetables growing at Mount Vernon. Not only vegetables, but all sorts of fruits and berries as well. Now, if we move from Mount Vernon on the Potomac up to Charlottesville, Virginia, the home of Thomas Jefferson at Monticello, Jefferson took his vegetables very, very seriously. Over the course of his life, he grew 99 different types of vegetables and herbs and over 330 varieties of these. And the vegetable garden was laid out very differently. It was one large expanse built on an immense terrace, and these vegetables were rowed out. He was very interested in experimenting with new types of foods. And the table at Monticello, well, it was an extraordinary experience to be invited to dinner because there was always a wide range of very interesting and beautifully presented foods. Now here in Williamsburg, there were other examples of vegetable gardens that were larger than what we see here at the Benjamin Powell house, gardens that were more on the scale of what we see at Monticello and Mount Vernon. So why don't we take a walk over to Great Hope's plantation? Come on.
Good day. I'm Mrs. Washington, the General's wife. How long has my husband been away from Mount Vernon? The longest time has been A, a week, B, 2 years, or C, 8 years. The answer to the question is C, 8 years. When my husband was the general of the American Revolution, he left in 1775. I thought he'd only be gone for a month when he went to the Second Continental Congress, but they made him commander-in-chief right away, and he was sent right away to Cambridge. He was gone from his home and was only see his home for 2 days, that is September 10th and 11th of 1781. But other than that, he would not see his home till 1783.
Here at Great Hope's Plantation, there's always work to be done, so I thought I'd jump in and give them a hand. That's it. Come on up, boys. Come on up. That's it. Come on, boys. Ed, Great Hope's farm or plantation represents, I guess, a middle-class farmer's hold here in Williamsburg.
That's the average folk.
I see.
Here.
What sorts of things would have been raised here? Just anything that was needed, I guess.
Well, corn first. You cover your food first. Corn is everything. So that's for your own consumption, maybe a bit to sell. And then everybody needs money. We grow tobacco for that. That's
That
what
was
gives
the
us
cash
income.
crop.
Yes, and a little bit of wheat too. A lot of people think that we ate wheat bread. No, that's for money.
Sold the wheat.
Yeah, we eat cornbread.
I see. Very good. And so the plowing today was for corn.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Turn over the ground first, let it sit, let that green manure rot some. We'll come back and harrow it, which is, of course, like drawing a comb through, knocks the clods down, gives us a seed bed, and then we'll plant upon it.
Ned, is this what a middle-class farmer would be wearing, what you have on?
Yeah, this is it. Look, I have it open here.
Yeah.
You don't.
That's right. No, I'm all buttoned up.
That's right. And
I wouldn't be a middle-class farmer wearing
oh
this.
no, the clothes make the man.
Oh, well.
We have about the same cut, but look,
Yeah, sleeves
See?
rolled up.
no ruffles.
Yours is no ruffles, yeah.
That's right.
Get caught in the equipment.
Right.
Yeah.
You, sir, are a gentleman.
Of course.
Yes, how nice.
And our friends here, we have Duke and Dan.
And Duke here and Dan, they're oxen, which are simply cattle trained to work. A lot of people don't realize that oxen is like a job description. It is what they do, not what they are.
Speaking of class and well-known names, Washington is certainly known as the father of the country, a great military leader, but I think a lot of people won't recognize him as a great farmer.
A great farmer is very innovative. The average fellow, nah, we're not innovative. We look to men of wealth and bearing, dressed like yourself, for innovation.
Well, I love the idea of what he was doing is he didn't want to be selling tobacco to the English anymore and sending money over there. He wanted to keep it in the colonies, and so from his own docks he was sending wheat and grain up and down the eastern seaboard and selling it directly and keeping the money here.
He was for us in military, but for us in farming. He was for America. And I mean, that just proves it right there.
Well, we've certainly seen that in the 18th century, the production of food and the preparation of food was much more difficult than it is today. But today, we do have a resurgence in interest in terms of where our food comes from. People are digging up their backyards and growing some of their own food, and even keeping a few chickens for fresh eggs. You know, George Washington loved Mount Vernon, his farm. In fact, he said he'd rather be on his farm than be the emperor of the world. He saw the future of the country and its land, and that we would become the breadbasket to the world. Hey, if you like this video, comment below and subscribe to my channel.